This is the Classic Auto Mall Show. Broadcast from the studios inside the Classic Auto Mall in Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Just 1 hour west of Philadelphia at Pennsylvania Turnpike exit 298. Featuring nearly 1,000 classic, vintage, and barn-find vehicles for sale under one climate-controlled roof. Now, here's your host, Classic Auto Mall president and the man with all the toys, Stewart Howden.
Is that my cue, JR? Oh, thank God I got it right this year. Let's bring it up. So, welcome, show number 177.
Wow.
Is that possible? Well, we skipped a few, but we did the best of.
Yes.
So, and it's a lovely day here in Pennsylvania.
Very brisk.
Very brisk. It was 6 below when I went to get my car serviced this morning. So, of course,
Wow.
One of those things. Why is it that it's such a pain in the butt to go get your car serviced? Even if it's free and warranty and all that, it's still like, got to drive up there. But they do give you nice loaner cars.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But, we've swung about 100 degrees since summer. It was nearly 100, and we're near zero. And it's like, wow.
So we want to quickly determine how many cars we have in inventory. Are you guys ready to guess? Steve, by the way, you didn't get to cheat today, so here's your sheet.
Right.
As he often does.
Yeah, cheater. How many cars in inventory, JR?
1,066.
Ooh, that's a good guess.
And they're amazing.
1,070.
1,074. So,
yeah.
So Steve wins
Did not
without going over.
Wow.
Welcome. We actually have a guest in our studio
Wow.
today, which is very unusual. Most of the people that we have guesting on the show are via Zoom or via telephone or via smoke signals or whatever.
I'm via Turnpike.
Yeah.
Author, photographer, and motorsports aficionado, a screenwriter. What else is in your title, JK? JK Kelly is with us, folks.
Nice to see everybody.
There's the clapping.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
I'm into a little bit of everything.
I like that. I mean, you've been a car guy forever, right?
Yes. It actually, I grew up, I was adopted at birth, and my parents owned a funeral home in Upper Darby, Delaware County, Pennsylvania. And that gave me, once I got my driver's license, that gave me access to the big block. Block motors and the Hearses and the limousines.
Did you flip their breather over on them so they sounded cool? Did they have the big 4-barrel car?
We weren't allowed to do anything under the hood. My dad said you could do whatever you want to, but take the signs off take the name of the funeral home off the side of the car.
Don't want to get that call.
And don't do anything like put dual exhaust or any of that nonsense on. So we got into a little bit of street racing and things like that. But
in the Hearse.
In the Hearse.
Yeah. Did you dominate or were you?
We did okay. We did okay. And then I crashed the station wagon that we used. We were drag racing and
this is good.
The two of us got to hydroplaning. You shouldn't drag race in the rain, right?
in a station wagon.
Well, the cool part was I had my toolbox way in the back of the wagon.
Right.
And it came to rest on the dashboard.
Oh my!
So it just missed my head. So it was a good
divine intervention because of the
It
the
could have very well
funeral
been.
home.
I was supposed to be here to write books and do all
I
that
think
stuff.
so. I mean, interesting. You didn't end up in that business, right? Did you?
I did for a while.
Right.
Both parents got sick, and my sister and I helped out until they passed, and then neither one of us had too much interest in being in that business. I had been in motorsports already, and so I said, any opportunity to get back into racing, I was jumping at it, so I did.
Well, it takes a special breed of person to be in that business or to be, because it can be a lot of sadness, but it also can be a celebration of life as well, too, when you're talking about people that have passed. And so it takes probably a very even-keeled person to do that.
Yeah, I actually did okay at it. It was, I felt as though if I could help somebody through a tough time, then it was a very rewarding experience.
Sure.
But it was offset by all the negatives. And so once I got an opportunity to go to work for some friends who had just started VP Racing Fuels, I jumped at it and I never looked back.
I got to tell you that VP Racing Fuels fuel tanks are the best on the planet. There's no secret code to open them. You don't have to do this to do that. They have a nice rubber hose on them as long as you want it to be, and you can use those cans. We have a bunch of them here. They're one of our favorite products that we use.
Do you know where all that came from? All the jug problems?
No, I do not.
That came from CARB, the California Air Resources Board, years ago. Some official was at a motocross race somewhere, and he saw a kid knock a jug over and spill some fuel.
Right.
And the kid just picked up the jug, put the cap back on it, and went about his business.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it was an issue in California that people are spilling gasoline.
Right.
And then somebody said, what about the fumes? So they mandated that you had all these specialty caps on so that you couldn't have spills.
Right.
So that's why you've got the trigger effects and all the other things that you see today. at the Walmarts and all the other parts stores.
Well, and the fuel or the gas pumps out in California were capturing fumes as well too. Long before anybody else was. Remember, they had the big rubber hose.
They did that in
them.
Jersey for a while too. I remember, which seemed like it was.
Well, Jersey is funny because Jersey is one of the few states that do not allow you to pump your own gas.
It's still bizarre.
That is so bizarre.
It's so bizarre. You get out of your car, you got to hand them the credit card.
Hey. You get back in your car. I'm like, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
No, we do have one station here in town, DeLong Sunoco, that actually will pump your gas for you. But that's more as a courtesy type service. I always thought it'd be fun to start a chain of gas station convenience stores with guys in white suit and white hat come out and check your oil and clean your windshield and check your wiper blades. And that might be cool. I don't have time for that, but it's just a good idea if anybody wants to run with it.
One of the first president of VP Racing Fuels, Fred Morrison, worked at a Sunoco station. And so I would go there and hang out with him. We'd pump gas back when pump gas was 29 cents or whatever. Exactly. And when a car would come in, you'd offer to check the oil, you'd do the wipers, do the windshield, all that other nonsense. But all that's gone.
I had a light come up on the dash of my wife's car and it said 1 quart low of oil. And I'm like, I don't even know that I've even looked at the engine before. I never even, we were always in the engine. You're always looking in there, messing around in there, doing things in there. And I'm thinking, I might be embarrassed if somebody called me on this to say, where do you put the oil?
No.
Yeah, and you open it up and you go, oh, that doesn't look very familiar. But, modern technology, I mean, it does a lot of great things.
I grew up with timing lights, like most of us.
Sure.
And now everybody's growing up with laptops.
So. And of course, computers. I mean, if you look at in restoring cars anywhere that are built anywhere after the early 2000s, it's going to be mostly computers. I mean, and that's what the cars have. And it's amazing. I dropped something under the seat of my wife's car, and I looked under that seat, and the amount of wires under there, it looked like it could, the space shuttle. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And not in a good way. I mean, there are certain things. Maybe they should just come out with remember white cans of beer at the grocery store? It just said beer. Maybe it's just car. What is this? It's just a car. It's white and it's plain and it doesn't have any features. And
well, I could see where he's leading me to this. Well, just come out here to the Classic Auto Mall and buy something that's
exactly.
Nice. Yeah. I saw some really nice 55 Chevys out here. There's all kinds of cool stuff.
We got a few cars in here. You've been here before, though, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So
you could spend a day and then some easily here.
Yeah. It's actually 1,077 cars is probably more than we should have. I mean, it gets a little bit crowded, and you can't display the cars as well as you'd like to. But on the other side of it is 99% of what we sells online, not from people walking in the door here. So although we're glad for everybody to come and walk through and see it and point at all the cars, from a business standpoint, it doesn't make as much sense because 99% of the time it's a guy calls in he sees it on Hemmings or ClassicCars.com or whatever. So, and of course, all of us read those magazines back in the day. I mean, if you looked at, I remember looking in the back of the Rob Report and just drooling over cars that were in that magazine. And we couldn't afford the magazine, so you go to the drugstore and sneak a peek, remember?
I don't remember that. I just remember Playboy when I was growing up.
They didn't have those at the drugstore.
Yeah, no.
That wasn't there. So right out of school, you went to Penn State, right?
I went to Penn State.
Majored in partying and
I learned how to do a lot of things there. But education was another story. No, I was actually there studying the administration of justice because I wanted to go into law enforcement. Right. And right in the middle of all that, I found out that my eyes weren't good enough to pass any of the standards. Contacts wouldn't fix the problem, so I just changed my major right to journalism. Right. I was traveling with my buddies to Gainesville and all these other tracks.
Gator Nationals.
Yeah, we would leave Penn State on a Thursday morning. Be at Gainesville Thursday night late. Mm-hmm. I'd take pictures and such all weekend long. Sunday night we'd haul ass all the way back to Penn State to get back to school.
And did you sell the pictures, or what did you do with the photos?
After the first couple times, some people said the photos were good enough to sell, so I contacted magazines. They bought them, and then they started giving me credentials to go to the races. Right. And then because I was studying journalism, one of the editors had this great idea of, well, since you're doing the photography, write the story to go with it. Right. So I did that for a while, but then freelancing doesn't pay the bills very well.
Yeah, there's not a lot of money in it, right?
No. So I was very passionate about NASCAR, so I reached out to Charlotte Motor Speedway. You guys hiring in any capacity? And they said, we're not, but Dygaard's looking for a new PR guy for Darrell Waltrip. So I called there, I interviewed, got the job, and stayed down there for a bit.
Wow. So they must have seen something they really liked. I mean, you didn't basically have any other than some freelancing stuff, right? You didn't have a whole lot of experience, right?
The reality was, I think they liked me because I was a Yankee. They had been surrounded. The Gardner brothers were both from Connecticut.
That's right.
And they
That's
were.
right.
And when I went down there, I was introduced to sweet tea and all the funny things. I had dinner at supper time or supper at dinner time. I'm not sure what the heck was going on.
Brunch and lunch
But they actually said to me, they said it's nice to have another Yankee on board because
everybody was Southern.
Everybody was Southern, and it wasn't that they felt outnumbered, but they just culturally. It was just different.
It's different because, there's so many different things that go, in the South versus the North. And not only just food, but it's dialect. It's what things you find funny in the South, they don't find funny in the North and vice versa. So,
well, I'm hoping there's nobody listening in the South right now.
Oh, no.
It's there. They should all be out on the beach, or actually in the South, they're shoveling snow.
They're shoveling snow.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, Walmart has just made a killing on snow
Yeah, they've done well. But
I
do remember I got used up for something. I said something that only Yankee would say.
Right.
And they ragged on me so bad. And then they screwed up on something during a race.
On purpose, maybe?
And no. But I said to them, no wonder you guys lost the war.
Oh!
And I said, if you're going to get nasty with me, I can throw a couple punches too.
Just so you know, I'm from East Tennessee, which we were divided loyalties. So we'll leave it at that.
I was going to ask you, I picked up a little bit of an accent.
Well, if I'd have had a couple of shots of Jack Daniels, you'd really have picked up on it. So it really comes out then. So it was funny when I moved to Los Angeles. I lived there for 3 years, and my accent just got more pronounced when I lived in LA for some reason. I don't know. It was because I was trying to hold on to my heritage or what it was. So they thought that was interesting, though. The guy
that is interesting.
Drank Jack and water.
There's some psychology to that.
There could be, absolutely. So Penn State, you gave up on that, went to work for DW, who's got to be a character. I mean,
it was a fascinating time to be there because he was just getting ready to really push to get out of his contract.
Yeah. So this would have been
78, 79.
Oh, right. 78, 79.
Yeah, it's when he first said, this contract's no good, I want to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And the problems that were happening behind the scenes were getting really, really interesting. There were some guys that wanted to show their allegiance to the driver.
Sure.
And others wanted to show allegiance to the team.
Right.
So it really got silly. And as it turns out, I married a girl from Philadelphia who moved down. She hated North Carolina.
Right.
Didn't want anything to do with it.
Sure.
So between the Waltrip issues, and I could see that there was going to be some problems there, she wanted to move back. And that's when my parents were sick.
Right.
And that's when
timing worked out.
That's when I said, all right, let's go back and take care of things at home.
Sure.
But years later, after all that happened, I was back at VP, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, and they've built a hell of a company. VP has. I mean,
when I started there, the phone would not ring for the entire month of December and January. It wouldn't ring.
Wow.
There was no point in going back to the office to check the answering machine because there would be nothing on it. Wow. So we would just screw around up here, and then we'd do some trade shows like the old Miller Motorsports show that now is this coming weekend at Oaks.
Mm-hmm.
But we went from doing maybe in the Northeast 3,000 a month, to 3,000 a minute. Years later, so the business really has grown
and still successful to this day. Right?
It's still rocking, and I think the key to that has been that the racing fuel division has always been super strong, and it's taken on all comers, and we've been very successful. 76 got out of the business, for Christ's sake.
Right, exactly. They went away.
Then it was just Sunoco and VP banging heads.
Mm-hmm.
But when Alan Sarwick bought the business from Steve Burns, he was very big on diversification and box products and chemicals and additives and things like that. And that part of the business has exploded.
Right.
There was a product called SEF, which is small engine fuel, that's ethanol free, that is designed to work in chainsaws, any small power equipment, rescue equipment for fire departments and such. Starts whenever you need it to, no matter how cold, how hot. There's never any water issues with it. So that diversification right there has been monstrous.
Sure.
Well,
you see, I mean, battery-powered equipment nowadays, it's getting better and better. And it's funny because you think back to the day when you had a lawnmower and you had to pull it 100 times to get it to start sometimes. You just wear yourself out pulling that thing. And now with these new fuels, you don't have to. Or even with an electric. I mean, it goes. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I bought an electric blower, and the thing weighs like 800 pounds. The battery is like made of mercury, I'm certain. I get my right arm worn out. Yeah. No. So... And VP is still based in this part of the world?
They're based in San Antonio.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
They have offices when Chester started its resurgence, when the state and Fed starts to put money into Delaware County and into Chester, we lost our lease, so we moved to Newark, Delaware, built a facility there. We picked up the tanks that we had in Chester, put them on flatbeds, and rolled them down to Newark and stuck them up in the air and just kept going.
Oh, Delaware is very welcoming to businesses. So
very much so. So we were there. There's also a facility in Terre-Haute, Indiana. They just bought a property in Parker, Arizona, where they'll be moving the California facility to Arizona.
And involved in all types of racing, right? I mean,
but while I was there employed, we had everything going from Formula One all the way down to 50cc motocross.
Sure.
And everything in between.
Right. They, I think a lot of these companies realized they were narrowly focused on NASCAR or narrowly focused on something. And they went, wait a minute, why aren't, all these engines are engines, right?
Well, even in the beginning, there were so many of our guys were drag racers and motocross riders. Mm-hmm. And typically a lot of those guys will consume a 5-gallon pail or a jug over a weekend.
Right.
And I was more focused on round racing, where a racer will pick up a drum for the weekend.
Right.
So I'd say, I'll focus on the the oval track business, and you guys can worry about.
You sell your pint, I'll sell my gallons, right?
And so once they came out with some products that really address the needs of the oval track racers, that are much different in a lot of cases than drag racers and motocross and others, that business exploded too.
I don't think people realize how much subset of NASCAR and dirt track and all these different racing that goes on in this country almost on a daily basis. That, I mean, there are so many things that you've never even heard of, and tracks that you've never heard of. And this part of the world is very, this is car central around here. People don't realize how car centric this part of the world is. Yeah. And I think that that's a good thing and a bad thing.
Well, draw a circle around here, draw a circle around Detroit.
Yeah.
I mean, these are...
Yeah,
that's where the action is.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate it gets cold as hell for 3 or 4 months out of the year. But, if you're into rally racing and all the other stuff.
That's your thing, right?
That shouldn't stop you.
I'd like to see more rally racing in the U.S.
I saw a poster for some hill climb in Reading. I don't know if it's an old one or a new one.
It's an old one, the one they used to do up to the Pagoda.
Okay.
I mean, I say it's old one. They've started doing it again. They stopped for a couple of years, and then they started doing it again. And you think, that sounds like fun, just to drive up a hill, and that looks... So I went and watched it one time. Yeah. Like, this is not playing around stuff. These guys are going 160 at the top, between stone walls that are not very well... It looks like Goodwood, There's no room for error. And I thought, maybe this is a little more than an amateur jumps in.
I fell for rally racing years ago when I was at VP, and every year I would look at what element of the business are we not fueling.
Right.
And rally racing, global rally racing, wasn't high on our list. Mm-hmm. And so I focused on that. I went to M Sport, made a deal with them, developed a fuel with those guys, and started to go some rally races. And I really developed an incredible passion for rally. Worked with the guys at Vermont Sports Car quite a lot up there. It's one thing to get in a car and go around in circles or go down the drag strip. But when you're racing between trees and all the other cool stuff that you're doing in the elements, what I've watched Travis Pastrana do some incredible things with cars.
Yeah. Well, the thing about a track is the surface doesn't change. But in rallying and offshore powerboat racing, those two come to mind. The surface is always changing. It's willy-nilly changing. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the fans in rallying are crazy. I wanted to say another word. But, I mean, they're standing in the middle of the track until the last possible second to get out of the way.
We've all seen on ABC's Wild World of Sports in the old days where you'd have, like in Kenya or something, you'd have 6,000 people and they would be closing in on the track to be able to see around the guy in front of them. And all of a sudden, this four-wheel drive monster would come flying, some Audi would come flying out of nowhere and
You see that in golf tournaments. Those guys get closer and closer and closer. One of those guys, Tiger's going to shank one, and you're going to take one right to the forehead. And I guess I'm certain that there are waivers that you sign off on at all of these type of events, rallying or any of it.
Probably.
Those rally drivers, I mean, to do what they do, and then to have a guy that you trust implicitly 100% that's giving you directions on what's next. By the way, there's a turn coming up in now, and crazy.
Have you ever done any off-road racing yourself or driving?
No.
We went to Baja years ago, 3 or 4 times, and we wound up with off-road vehicles where we could run some of the course. And that was amazing because our co-pilot had to watch what was going on.
Right.
He was watching the GPS. And I do remember this one spot that I actually used in one of my books where you haul ass and you see this mountain coming closer and closer. And all of a sudden, at this GPS marker, you better downshift,
right,
brake hard, and make a hard right, or you're going down a 1,000-foot ravine. And so in Deadly Driver, one of the novels I've written, I use that scene. You have to read the book to find out what happened and why.
The old hook. I like it.
There you go.
There you go, folks. And you can find the books on Amazon. I found all of your books on Amazon. Yep. And you've written 10, 12, 14?
I've written 6 novels. And then last year got into screenwriting, and I've written 5 since then.
And Fueling Around is more autobiographical. It's a true story, right?
It's a true story.
Right.
If Howard Stern said this about the book that he wrote, he said it was actually a letter to his children that explained why I was away so much, why I was so focused, why I was so busy trying to build this business, and why I was, while you're stuck here in the wintertime, I was at Speed Weeks in Florida, getting a suntan.
Yeah, it's tough with social media to complain about your job when you're at the Ruth Chris Steakhouse with a porterhouse in front of you, and your wife's home feeding the kids beanie weenies, and it's 2 below.
That actually cost a marriage. It's probably cost quite a few.
I was going to say, I think there's more than one that it has cost over the years.
Yeah, It's unfortunate because in Fueling Around, I tried to explain to myself and also to anybody that read how you can get so caught up in a passion for something, and it is something that just drives you.
Singular and focus almost.
Right? Yeah, but I'm equally passionate for my family, my children, and my wife Lisa. So trying to balance all that, they understand what you do and why. It doesn't make them feel any better sometimes when you're not around. But now that they're all grown and they have children of their own,
they get it.
They get it. Yeah. They're all working their butts off and very successful with what they're doing. But they look at me now and they say, "We get it now."
Yeah, we understand.
When we were 10, we wanted Dad to be here, not at Le Mans or something. But even I went and checked out Everest a couple of years back. So I was in Dubai and I saw how close Kathmandu was, and I said, "I'm going to go check out Everest."
Right here.
And it was, and went to see that. I used that story in one of the other books I wrote about a murder that takes place at base camp.
So that's the tail wagging the dog. If you decide you want to go somewhere cool, you go there and then you write a book about it, right?
It can happen that way. Yeah.
What you write an autobiography. Did you have any help with it? I mean, is it hard to be objective to write about yourself? And you had to have learned stuff about yourself that you didn't even know.
Learned stuff about myself and shared some of that. If you really want to go into some sort of a deep dive, I was very, very intense. I still am at my passions. But I always had an edge, and I could never figure out why I had an edge. I applied the edge to the success that I've had, but it wasn't until about 3 years ago when my daughter ran me through Ancestry and hooked me up with my biological mother, who I got to meet 3 years ago.
Wow.
My daughter said, "Here's a phone number. This woman, she's probably your sister, long-lost sister, you don't know. Call her. I've arranged you to call her and talk to her." So I called the woman and talked to her for a couple of minutes, and she said, "I just want to let you know that I gave birth to you 60-some-odd years ago." Wow. And it turns out, while I was working in Chester at VP, she was living in Aston. And so she's got this whole long story. I found out that I've got 3 brothers that I've never knew anything about. And the edge that I had that I've been able to manipulate a little bit was the inner anger of, why was I adopted?
Why me?
Right. The parents that grabbed me gave me an incredible opportunity and took great care of me. And my mother, my biological mother, says it's the best thing that we could have done because I was too young to have you. And the parents that you had gave you opportunities I never could have.
There's amazing stories of adoptive parents who, especially back in the 50s and 60s, where people did it because of their passion for children and they just wanted to do the right thing. And nowadays, it seems to have gotten a little bit different than that, and it seems to be that they're trying to make you things that you aren't, and that kind of thing. And I think that if back in the day, the adoptive parents, kids that I knew that were adopted, their parents were the best parents on the block. They were the parents that were participating in everything and doing all the things that, baking cupcakes for the whatever. I mean, they were the real participatory parents, and our parents were doing their own thing or whatever. So it was always interesting to me to see that. We were always kind of jealous of the adopted kids. We thought that they kind of got a better shake, and that's far from the truth.
Interesting, yeah. Some of the kids I remember in school would bust on you like, your parent, what's wrong with you? Your parents gave you away. Right. Which as a kid, you go, okay, you're just an asshole. So here I am sitting here on a podcast.
Going deep dive.
I had a meeting yesterday with a millionaire about producing one of my films. And I think I turned out okay.
I think you did great.
God bless America.
Yeah, God bless America. I mean, listen, everything we can do. So fueling around, great play on. I love the title. Goes from your date of birth till when? How deep did you go to your?
It went until I left VP, till I retired. After new ownership came in, I had been around the world 100 times. I was beat. I had done everything that I wanted to do, with the exception of getting a VP decal on an F1 car. That was the one thing I wanted to do. We talked to, we had a big Russian distributor named Delphin who helped facilitate a meeting with the Russians years ago. And they wanted to put a 3x4-inch decal somewhere that you could never see it on the race car. They wanted like $500,000.
Oh, yeah.
And crazy. I said, I'll send that right away. I'll wire that right away. But it's funny, going back to F1, when I'm trying to think of what team started, there was an announcement that came out years ago that there was going to be an F1 team from America.
Right.
And so I had the idea, well, an F1 team from America should be fueled by an American company.
Absolutely.
So I reached out to them. Their engine builders were Cosworth at the time. And Cosworth had an interesting way of doing things. They said, we'll need you to ship us, let's say, 2,000 liters of fuel.
Right.
Which is expensive to start out with. The fuel's expensive.
And expensive to ship, right? Yeah.
But then they wanted us to pay for the rebuilds. They were going to cycle these engines, 3 different engines. We had to pay the rebuilds, and so I think they wanted a check for $400,000,
right,
to take care of the rebuilds. And we said, "You all have fun.
Have a nice time."
As it turns out, that entity never got off the ground. So had we spent that money,
you never got it back.
Never gotten anything back. Yeah,
no clause that said you get your money back. Right? No take-backs.
But at the time, we were doing dyno work with some of the F1 teams. VP has always been very good at coming up with some really cool molecules that make some good power, and we did well. But when it gets into the financial end of things, it's very expensive.
Yeah, you better be a BP or somebody that's
big.
Yeah, it's not quality as much as the ability to fund that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, you'll have to diminish on the quality because, McDonald's can't do Angus beef in their hamburgers. Otherwise it'd be $30.
It's funny. I could tell you this. It's a funny story for those people that are in F1 who remember Elf. Remember the Elf?
Yeah,
film?
Sure.
We were doing great in America and starting to build our business overseas. And so my territory was the East Coast and all of Europe. And so I started doing some things in Europe, and all of a sudden Elf came to America and went after our bread and butter, which was Supercross and motocross, with these oxygenated fuels. And in order to let oxygenated fuels get into AMA racing, they had to get the AMA to allow them, so they changed the rule book. But at the same time, they convinced the AMA, after they sponsored one of their classes, do us a favor and change the specific gravity regulation to make it a little bit higher. And to do that, it meant that VP's C12 would not be legal, and we would have to reformulate to make the fuel heavier to be compliant to make the rules.
So starting over almost, right?
Well, just jacking the specific gravity isn't that hard of a deal. You just find one of the chemicals you use is base stock. You put a little bit more of that in it, essentially, if it's a heavy fuel. Like Nitro Methane, for instance, is super heavy. We didn't use nitro. You couldn't.
Right.
But what that did was, that got us fired up saying, well, Elf wants to come over and play here. we then developed this whole line of oxygenated fuels, taking advantage of the new AMA rules.
Mm-hmm.
And those same oxygenates we were able to use in fuels overseas and start doing things with rally and touching some of the other elements that Alpha's doing. So much so that Alpha would come out with a new fuel and give it to a Supercross team, and they'd do well. And the Supercross team would come to us and say, we're going to have to switch to these guys because they're making more power. Within a week, our chemists in San Antonio had 2 pails of fuel at Pro Circuit, or wherever you wanted to send it. They'd dyno it, we'd make more power. So they'd switch back to VP. And then the Elf guys would hear that we've done this, but they would take a month to develop a new product. They had 15 chemists working on these products. It would take them a month to do it because that's the way corporations move.
Sure, they're slow.
And then they'd send a new fuel over. It would make a little more power. We'd go back to Texas and say, hey, guys. And within 2 days, there was another fuel on the market that was making more power. So much so that Elf eventually quit.
They just said nothing.
They quit the market, and they said, when I met them later, after they rebranded as Total, they invited me to go to their lab in Soleil's. And they said to us, it amazed us how quickly you guys responded. No matter what we did, your response was faster than anything we've ever seen. And it wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. It was with a better product.
Sure.
And so that was the end of that story.
Well, and proof would always be in the pudding, right? I mean, if you're making more horsepower, I mean, it's an easy measurable metric, right?
Well, and it's not just making horsepower. You've got some products, some chemicals you use can make an engine run hotter.
Right.
So it's got to be something that'll run with the right temperatures, make power, and last.
And nitromethane, I mean, used in drag cars, is it used anywhere else? Is there anywhere else that uses
it's used in some sprint cars can use it. Some tractor pullers use it. They can use mixed with methanol, things like that. Right. You can use nitromethane in certain cases as an additive with certain gasolines. Nitromethane will not mix with all gasolines or race fuels. And the way to test it is when you have, let's say, a mayonnaise jar, beaker, or whatever, put your fuel in there and then put the percentage of nitromethane you want to put in the fuel. And if it's not going to mix, it'll just settle right to the bottom. Yeah, and you could agitate it all you want to all day.
And it would still go to
set it back down, and it'll be at the bottom.
And that, tells me a lot about your southern time in the South when you say a mayonnaise jar. So is that Dukes or Hellman's?
I'm not allowed to have mayonnaise in my house. My wife hates it. That's a whole other story.
Hey, that's a whole thing for, well, you can't say soda down in the South either, right?
Pop,
you got to say pop.
Yeah, tennis shoes and all that other stuff.
Sneakers. There's a whole bunch of those.
I'll tell you what, the one thing I love about the South, though, that I'm going to Charlotte in a few weeks for the National Motorsports Press Association get-together. But what I loved about the South was everyone was so nice, and everyone was much slower.
Yeah.
And here, you go into a diner, you've got your coffee and you've got a menu, and somebody's standing over top of you asking for an order in a second. You go to a diner in Charlotte, back in the day at least, you'd sit there for 5 minutes.
Sure.
And maybe somebody would slide a menu.
How you doing?
And then, whatever. And
we went to a diner in New York City, and they were literally cleaning the plates before we even taken it. I was like, "Can I get that one last bite?" It was like, and I get it. They're trying to, maximize their dollar. And but in the South, I mean, it's a different world, and people are slower in some ways, but. You can't judge them incorrectly just because a guy's a slow speaker doesn't mean he's not the smartest guy in the room. A lot of those guys were.
No, I'm not.
No. I know you weren't.
It's actually the guys that don't talk as much and just sit back and listen. I always can credit them as being the smart ones.
Yeah, that's the one.
Because the Dygaard guys told me one time, they said you're going to be exposed to a lot of millionaires and other people, and the best thing for you to do is just keep your mouth shut and your ears open, and you'll learn something. And so I did.
So you used to write and photograph for some of the automotive magazines as well.
I sold stuff to Superstock, to Stock Car, to Hot Rod, and to Carcraft.
Anything particular you wrote about, or just drag racing mostly, or NASCAR?
In Superstock, they gave me a monthly column called Afterthought, and I would do feature stories usually. Like I met Tommy Ivo, TV Tommy,
yeah.
He was in this area years ago doing something, and so I met him at a hotel and did an interview, and feature stories, race coverages, anything.
And Jungle Jim was from this part of the world, and he did amazing. I mean, what he did was usually would be a team of people to do, and he did it kind of on his own, right?
Yeah, and as an entertainer, he was the first John Force, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, and John Force kind of took his place.
He did. And I talked to Force about Jungle, and they had met, obviously. But I don't remember if John ever raced him.
That was my next question, yeah.
But there's a lot of stories that go back to Vinnie Knapp. Vinnie Knapp was a big guy for booking funny car shows. So Jungle was always there with Bruce Larson and Ed McCullough and all those guys. Mm-hmm. And when Jungle died, Knapp, I remember the conversation, Knapp called Forrest and had a conversation about, we need somebody like you, and I'm going to help you do whatever you can. I mean, to succeed.
If you look at what John Force has done for that sport, is immeasurable, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's as good as it gets, right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate that he had the crash, because it's
man,
I saw Garlits at Larson's event.
Yeah.
A month ago, 2 months ago, whenever it was, and Don's just, what is he, 93 now?
Yeah.
He just had a birthday a couple of days ago, and he's just doing his thing. He's a happy camper. He's
I love those guys.
They're smiling, and for John to get hurt the way he did, just unfortunate.
You almost think, did you wait just to race too long to retire? Or did you there's always got to be that in your mind when you're towards the end of your career, something like that happens, right?
Yeah,
and of course,
the good news is he's still here.
He's still here, and still got his sense of humor, still got his his character, and Don Garlits was here when he was at that event, and also at the Simeone they did a tribute to him.
Yes.
And he came to our place here, and I was not here, of course. I always miss the cool stuff, and but he was, he's like Gene Winfield, the hot rod builder, who's 94 or 5 now. These guys, they don't know anything different, and I think if they retired, they'd probably just die.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine who's a VP distributor bought a property probably a half a mile away from Don's museum in Ocala, and he said, I can go past there. I can go to the what are they called, Cracker Barrel,
right?
And Don will be in there just having lunch or something like that, or if you just wander out behind the museum, Don's in the garage tinkering on something.
Yeah, I went there one time, and the lady at the counter, I don't know who she was, she said, "Oh, he's out back somewhere. Go see him." And I wandered around back there, and all of a sudden he was right there. And he said, "What do you want?" And I go, "I don't know. I just wanted to come say hello to you." "Oh, well then come on in." Just couldn't be a nicer guy. And the innovation that he made, I mean, would it have happened without him? Possibly, probably. But to change from front engine to rear engine saved, gosh, how many lives?
Oh, yeah.
You just think about the countless people that got hurt and feet. And
I got to give all those guys credit who drive anything with the engine in front of them like that. Caps has always been a great advocate for my books.
Sure.
He's read all of them and loves them. But I think they're all nuts.
Yeah.
They're all just...
Yeah, it's one of those things that I have a desire. I'd like to drive a Formula One car. I'd like to drive an Indy car. I'd like to drive a lot of things. Top fuel dragster? I don't think so. That's a little too much for me, especially the front engine ones.
Just hit the throttle once. And that's enough.
Yeah, I mean,
they clean the diaper and then you're all set.
And then, there's 427 Cobra replicas that I've driven that you give it about a quarter of the throttle and you go, no, that's
what amazes me on Instagram and some of the other social media channels. They show these guys who don't know how to drive Ferraris and McLarens and all the other stuff. They pull out of a parking lot, and a second later they're in a telephone pole.
Yeah, and you think, how bad of a driver do you have to be that you can't control a car and you're going less than 60 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour or whatever the speed is? You see the guys just do it all the time. And then the worst is then they run into somebody else's car. And of course, that poor guy was just minding his own.
You saw what happened to that actor who was in Paul.
Oh, yeah.
From Fast and Furious.
Yeah. Paul, what was his name?
All right.
Come on.
Somebody knows
Crack
Paul's.
Researchers here.
Paul's last name.
Paul Walker.
That's it.
Thank you.
Good find.
So the books you've written, like I said, most of them are fiction, but they're kind of based on, you've used some of your life experiences, obviously, motor racing and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do you follow Formula One today? And
very much so. Very much so.
And your latest book had a Formula One twist to it, was that right?
Well, Deadly Driver came out in 2021.
Right.
And that's a story about an American Formula One driver who comes up through driving at Thunder in Vermont and Lebanon Valley in New York, and gets a big break, meets a guy who wants to get into oval track racing in America. The guy funds him in America, and then he says, "I've had it with going in circles. I want to go Formula One racing," and takes him to Europe. And our character gets in a very compromising position, and the CIA forces him to work for them. So he becomes a spy for the CIA.
Gotcha.
And he has to do a couple of hits. He plants bugs. And all through this, he's doing everything he can to get away from the CIA, get back to racing. and chase down this exotic beauty that he's met in Japan. So that got great reviews. It's done very well. We've adapted that to a screenplay. And the last group that has shown an interest in it is Gullen down in Brazil. They're the ones who just did the Senna show.
Right. I haven't seen that either, but I hear it's wonderful.
It's excellent. They did it for Netflix. And so I'm hoping that maybe something good will come of that.
Absolutely. And the new F1 film, you got any thoughts on that? The one with Brad Pitt coming out one of these days?
I hope it's great.
I do too.
I hope it's great. When they were first trying to make it, there were a lot of rumors and stories about how things were going or not going, that there wasn't a script, et cetera, et cetera. But Pitt looks like he's done a good job. The director's great.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah, and they had a lot of involvement from Lewis and different people that were involved.
The F1 group, they were bent over backwards.
Yeah, which is maybe surprising to some degree, and then maybe not. I mean, look at what Drive to Survive did for them. I mean, it made them in America. Yeah.
They're on such a wave that they're just riding that wave as best they can. So I came out with Deadly Driver. We're going to re-release it this coming spring in conjunction with the release of that film, just to ride the wave.
Sure, why not?
And then because that did so well, that was Deadly Driver, I wound up writing a sequel called Switchback.
Oh, nice.
Which picks up where our driver leaves off.
God, I got a lot of reading to do now.
All the books are available in audiobooks as well as Kindles and in print.
Sure. And you kind of married, I mean, you talked about law enforcement early in your college career. Has that kind of got you the interest in the spy CIA part of this, or is that, how do you know about stuff like that? Or would you have to tell me if you told me?
No. Well, we talked about nitromethane earlier. And nitromethane, because it's a special chemical, it's got a lot of scrutiny and a lot of security around it. So for us, we always, because we stored it, handled it, and transported it, we met with the DEA and TSA and FBI and everybody else regarding certain things that I'm not allowed to talk about. But just knowing some of these folks and growing up around some folks in the FBI,
you were able to,
and police and state police, I've learned a lot.
Sure, and that makes for two very interesting subject matters: motorsports and CIA thriller. So to marry the two, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it actually, I think it read really well.
You got a favorite car movie out there that you over the years?
I just watched for the first time in I don't know how long. Le Mans,
right?
I think Steve McQueen and James Garner and all those guys have done all those different films back in the day, and Paul Newman. I thought they did a great job. So I got on a binge where I was watching all of those because of the project I did with John Nikas regarding Le Mans 1955. So not a favorite car movie, no. Even though I did think, for whatever reason, I was a guy who loved Dodges.
Right.
Growing up, I was my friends were all in the Chevys and Fords. And I was the dope in the mope, so to speak.
The dope in the mope.
But I followed Richard Petty, and he really turned me on to stock car racing, which is why I got involved with it. I've watched the crash he had with David Pearson at Daytona during the 500, and a few years later, I was on pit road and in victory lane with Darrell Waltrip. Because I followed a dream. I said, I got to get involved with that.
I want to be involved with that, right?
Yeah.
My favorite car movie?
Which?
White Lightning with Burt Reynolds. And it had a Dodge in it, or a Plymouth. I don't remember which one it was.
Well, follow that.
And Gator.
There was one with, was it Kurt Russell?
Oh.
Wait a second.
Yeah, Mr. Movie over here.
Clint Eastwood. They did one. Something in Lightfoot or something?
Yeah,
Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Yeah, and they drove around in a two-door Plymouth Fury with the lunatic who was in that backwoods canoe movie.
Deliverance.
Yeah. And
Ned Beatty? Was it Ned Beatty?
No, it wasn't Ned Beatty. It was the guy that had the screwed up teeth and all that.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who said, "You have a nice mouth, boy."
Real pretty mouth.
They had, he took them for a ride or something like that, and it was in a Dodge.
The kid playing banjo looks like Biden. He's got those same eyes and the whole thing. So anyway, I love racing movies, and I love, obviously Le Mans and Grand Prix were great movies for footage wise. They weren't much in the movie department as far as that goes. I mean, but it was interesting. The Rush was a pretty darn good movie about Niki Lauda and James Hunt.
Yep.
And, we've seen some pretty good ones out there.
The Art of Racing in the Rain, that I enjoy that, but anytime you screw with a dog, it kind of turns me off. So
right.
It was like watching Old Yeller with cars in it or something. So, but the interesting thing that taught me was, I told you about working on the Le Mans 55 story with John, and Patrick Dempsey had suggested something about that years before to John, and so when he ran into me, we said, let's do it. But in learning from Dempsey, it took, from the time Patrick bought the rights to that book, it took 10 years to that became a film.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there going, Jesus, guys.
Great.
I got Hollywood looking at all my scripts, and I'm thinking, maybe I can make it to that, maybe 10 years from now.
Well, and for those that don't know, Le Mans 1955 was a pivotal year in sports car racing. Mercedes dropped out after killing 50-plus people. Actually,
they killed, it wasn't that Mercedes killed it. The bottom line was that back in the day, they didn't have the safety equipment and the barriers and such. And when Hawthorne suddenly pulled over to get to pit road, there was no concrete barriers between pit road and the racetrack. He pulled over. Pierre Levay swerved to miss him. The other guys got together and sent Levay into the crowd.
Right.
So there was 84 people killed, hundreds injured. And the wild part about that story is that the race kept going.
Right.
Levay actually, the car caught fire. The engine block came out of it and tumbled through the crowd. Wow. Levay was ejected. There were no seatbelts. Right. Levay came out of the car and landed on the front stretch in front of pit road, and they kept the race going.
Oh my God!
And the reason they did that, which was fascinating, learning this stuff. A couple of years before this, in England there was an air show, World War II air show, and one of the planes crashed into the crowd. And when that happened, they immediately canceled the show. The spectators went to their cars and flooded the roads, leaving the facility, which meant all the rescue crews couldn't get in. So the people who were in the tower, the control tower at Le Mans, knew about what had happened. They learned their lessons, and they let the race continue to go. So the guy from Mercedes, I forget his name, he actually went out on the racetrack and was waving the cars around Levay's body until the gendarmes could get him off the track. Crazier than that was Hawthorne got out of the car and said, I can't drive now. I can't have anything to do with this.
Right.
And his crew chief said, you've got to get in the car and at least go around one more time so we could put the relief driver in.
Otherwise, we're
out.
Yeah.
And at the time, Hawthorne was like, I don't give a shit about the race.
Right.
But he did finally talk him into doing that, and his co-driver got in and took off. The wild part about this, too, is John Fitch, the American John Fitch, who flew P-51s over Europe in World War II, he was Pierre Levay's co-driver. So he was on pit road with Levay's wife watching this whole catastrophe take place. And Levay was driving a Mercedes, and it was John who called Stuttgart and said, you guys need to pull the team out of respect for what's happened here. Sure. So they did. And Fitch went on, he raced a couple more years, but he went on to develop safety equipment for not just racetracks, but for the highways.
Right.
So
barriers.
Those barriers, those are Fitch barriers that you see that are filled with water or sand or whatever.
Well, and it's nice to hear that the race continued on, not because of greed, but from a standpoint of trying to get to rescue and safety and all that. And I mean, to watch those cars running down the Mulsanne Straight, 200, however fast they were going, 200 plus miles an hour, and people just standing right on the side there. I mean, you just think, even the guy waving the flag standing out in the middle of the track.
Yeah, they're all nuts. Well, the craziest thing of this was, if anybody, if we're still good with topic, Levay was fascinating because 2 years prior to this, he was driving his own car at Le Mans, and he heard in his first stint, he heard something in the engine, and he refused to get out of the car to let the co-driver give him a break. And he told his wife, if I let this guy in, he's going to run the car too hard. I need to nurse this thing home.
Right.
So Levay in 53 ran 23 hours. He had a 7-lap lead, and the engine let go.
Wow.
With 45 minutes left in the race. And because of that, Mercedes came to him and said, we saw what you did. We want to give you a car.
Right.
He raced and he fell out in 54 or 55. He had the accident.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a Mercedes that was involved with all this.
But it wasn't, yeah.
But years later, when Mike Hawthorne, who became the first F1 champion from Britain, when he retired, he left to get together with some friends and was street racing, essentially. One of his buddies who was driving a Mercedes, they got together on the road, and Hawthorne went into a tree, and that was the end of him.
Wow.
So the story just went full circle.
And Mercedes got out of racing for 30 plus years?
And Mercedes has not won at Le Mans since then.
Right.
But Porsche, as you know, has been dominant.
So dominant, yeah. We had Hurley Haywood on the show talking about that a couple of weeks ago, and David Hobbs. We've had Brian Redman, all have raced there and raced for Porsche. And Porsche, you know, we jokingly say that they're easy to drive. They're easy to drive, but you don't count on me winning a race at Le Mans because they're easy to drive. They're easier than most to drive, they said. But some of those cars were handfuls back in the day.
Well, LeVay even supposedly, when LeVay took the Mercedes to Nürburgring to test it, the thought was that he commented to a few drivers that it was a lot of car.
Right.
And so the fact that he had an issue with it, there's some people that say this is what happened. We recreated the accident using computers, and this is what really happened. But it's just an unfortunate situation. Yeah. Long term, it protected the fans, it protected racers in a lot of different ways, and it's protected people on the highways.
Yeah, I mean, European motor racing kind of shut down for a while after that, right? And
it almost came to an end.
Completely, yeah.
Because you got to remember, too, 55 was 10 years after the end of World War II.
Right.
And so the spin we have on the screenplay, it's called Something Like a War. Because even though the war had ended in Europe, it hadn't ended on the racetrack. So you had Mercedes up against Talbot and all the other cars were racing there. And a lot of the people that were on the teams had worn uniforms and fought for Germany or Britain or Italy or America in the war. And as a matter of fact, at the Le Mans facility, the SS, the German SS, had kept a lot of the French resistance fighters that they were capturing. Right. And they would line them up once a week and take them out.
Wow.
So when all these people came back to Le Mans, there was still a war.
A lot of tension, yeah.
Yeah, they weren't happy that Mercedes was there.
Well, just like the Japanese, I mean, when they started moving to the United States, there was a lot of unhappy American soldiers who said, this is not right. And of course, now they've mostly, I guess, reconciled. And I think obviously with Le Mans and Europe, they've probably laid their battle to rest, if you will.
Well, and even to frame that a little bit further, one of the guys who was involved with the accident, to get away from England and get away from Europe, because he was always recognized, he moved to New Zealand and became a car salesman. And he talked to the distributor of the owner of all these car dealerships. You need to bring in Toyotas from Japan.
Right.
Because it's a great car and you'll sell 1 million of them. And the guy said, I'll never buy anything from Japan. They tried to kill us.
Right. Yeah.
And years later, he became the biggest seller of Toyotas in the Pacific.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Well, sometimes the almighty dollar gets a hold of you and you do what you do, right?
Well, yesterday's enemies, today's allies. It's however you want to play that.
You can play that many, many, many ways. So what's next in the book writing? What do you got on the horizon?
Books. The last book that I wrote is called The Lost Bird, and that is a modern day story about a B-17 that is stolen during an air show. Okay.
Hard to steal a B-17, right?
Not really.
I guess not.
Not really. And that's why I got pushback. When I went to, I've been to a lot of the air shows because in
Oshkosh and
I've been, you've got Reading right up the road here. You got Reading and you've got a lot of them all across the country, and I've been to a lot of the air museums. And I worked with the folks at the Palm Springs Air Museum to make sure that I did the book right. And then I worked with Chris Polhemus, who's one of the pilots who flies restored warbirds. He was an American Airlines pilot for years and fought and served in the military as well. I want to make sure I got all those details right. But in doing these events, I found that, you may not know this, but you can ride on some of these planes. Mm-hmm. Some of them are very expensive. It might cost $500 to ride in the nose of a B-17 during an air show. But people do it. There's lines of people that want to go for the rides. They're spectacular birds to fly in. So I just came up with this idea of what happens if someone were to steal one.
Right.
Why would someone steal one?
Right.
And is it feasible?
Right.
And so in working with Palm Springs, the president out there was very supportive, but he said, we can't get behind this. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school.
Right.
If I am, I'll get an email later. But
or we will.
The concern that was shared by some of the board there was, we don't want to put the idea in someone's head that maybe they should come to an air show and steal a bird.
Well, copycat crimes, all that kind of stuff that you deal with.
So, but typically when you go to these air shows, you go through metal detectors, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway,
But the details of a B-17, I mean, aren't readily maybe known. I mean, like I said, do they even have a key? Maybe they do actually have a key, you know? I mean...
Well, no, the whole key is you can't just jump in a plane and take off during an air show.
Right.
But these guys go up for a ride. And in the Lost Bird, they've paid their way in.
Right.
They're out over Southern California now. And one of the guys brushes past some of the tourists that are there enjoying the view.
Right.
And all of a sudden, he's in the cockpit, and he's got a 45 at somebody's neck.
Right.
And he tells them where to land and what to do next. And from there, the key to this is there's a Marine who's coming home from his job in Europe to visit his ailing father, and he sees on the news that somebody took a B-17. Now he's pissed off because that's a national treasure.
Right.
Do that, right?
Right.
But he gets home and he finds that his brother, who's autistic, has been involved in this somehow.
Oh,
and,
nice twist.
That in and of itself takes us down this journey. So I wrote it as a screenplay. It's getting a lot of traction in front of heads of development in Hollywood. So I'm happy to say that.
Blank sheet of paper's got to be difficult to start the story. I mean, do you start at the very beginning? That sounds like a stupid question, but I mean, do you start from the very beginning, or do you start in the middle?
It just comes and then it's almost like a meal. And if I'm thinking about a fillet, then all of a sudden, do you start it with the fillet, or do you bring the dessert in, or whatever?
Salad, or
well, the thing with books, I've often been told that you've got to give people a reason to turn the page.
Right.
Every page, you've got to give them a reason to turn the next one. And in writing a screenplay, you have to pretty much do that to a degree too.
Right. Well, because in writing a screenplay, you have to write not only the words, but the emotion, right? I mean, somebody...
You write all that, yeah.
You have to write that the guy's crying or sad or has a sad face.
Yeah. But the beauty that I like of that is when you write a book, you've got to describe everything, because you've got to describe it for the reader. I've got to say, this guy's got a red coat, the walls are white, the halls are blue.
Right.
And with screenwriting, I don't have to do any of that.
Right.
Which I think is very freeing. The art directors and the directors can decide what the damn thing is going to look like. I just want to give them the story, and hopefully they sink their teeth into it.
Well, it's like talking to a person on the phone before you actually meet them in person. You have a notion of what they look like based on their voice and tone and inflection and words that they say and all that. And maybe you're right, and maybe you're completely wrong, right? So, so motorsport stuff, you still go and watch and pay attention to all that, and you're not missing any NASCAR races, or?
Well, NASCAR is not the NASCAR that it used to be.
Well, that's true.
I still enjoy it. I just wish they didn't have some of the things that they've got today.
Do you get up at 7 a.m. to watch the F1 race?
I'm usually up around 7:30, 8 o'clock anyway. So I'll be downstairs riding my bike or something, watching the races. But F1's great, but it's not always that exciting.
No, that's unfortunate. There's no rubbing at the end with 12 cars.
It's the same thing with NASCAR. When I was watching NASCAR when I first got into it, we had slingshots and all the fun stuff. Bill Elliott and Petty and Bobby Allison, all those guys doing all the great stuff, whether it was on the short tracks or the big tracks.
Right. Well, we always talk about the glory days of racing, and in NASCAR there was more characters, it seems like, back then. The guys today don't seem like they're as much characters.
They're too polished.
They're very polished. And,
well, when I worked for Dygaard, one of the things they told me, every once in a while, Darrell will get out of the car, and if he's not happy, he's going to say something that we may not be too thrilled with, and the sponsor may not want it to be said either. So your job, Yankee, is to get between him and the microphone and change the subject. And I'm like,
that's tough.
Yeah, that's really going to be tough. But for the most part, Darrell was good, and he knew when to calm down.
Yeah, no, I think they all did that. And of course, in 1979, the Daytona races, probably did more for NASCAR racing than anything.
And that was the first year CBS broadcasted live,
right? Which
was great. CBS had come to the shop in Charlotte and did some video and some other things. That whole weekend was great for me. It was my first Daytona with the team, and Waltrip won the sportsman race.
Right. He
won the Twin 125. And he won the modified race with that Camaro. Right. So I got to go to Victory Lane 3 times that weekend with him. Nice. And the cool part was Pepsi or Coke were the official official drink of Daytona at the time.
I think it was Pepsi.
So we'd all have Gatorade hats on, everybody. Some jackass from PepsiCo would come in and he'd yank the Gatorade one. The PepsiCo one would go on, and my job was to get the hat off him and put another one back on.
Right.
And so
hats are important in NASCAR.
Very much so. Yeah. But it was turned into Frisbees. Right. Like, there goes the PepsiCo hat. And then Bill Broderick, who was from 76, he'd be in there making sure the 76 hat got on, the Goodyear hat got on, et cetera. Years later, when 76 decided they wanted to come into our world at VP and take over NHRA drag racing, when NHRA put the bid out for spec fuel and official fuel, they sent it to Sunoco, 76, and VP. And Broderick, I'll never forget, he came to Pomona, and he looked at me and said, "We're taking this deal away from you guys." And I just went like this. He said, "Go for it, Bill." And we won the bid. And a couple of years later, 76 got out. They were racing all together. And we were in it for about 10 years. We got the IMSA deal, spec fuel for IMSA, which I don't think I'm talking out of school. Sunoco wasn't very happy about that. They spent a lot of money at Daytona. And Daytona, they regarded was their track. And all of a sudden, these VP Racing fuel rigs were rolling into Daytona.
That must have made them mad.
And so I think that's what drove them to go after the NHRA deal.
Right.
So they became the spec fuel, or the official fuel, rather, for NHRA for a certain number of years. They didn't renew in 2024, so VP just got the bid back.
Wow.
So VP is the official fuel of NHRA, IMSA, World of Outlaws, World Racing Group, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Not a bad resume for them, right?
No, they're rocking. They're rocking. And as far as books go, because I was with VP at the very beginning, a couple of years ago, they asked me if I'd write a book for their 50th anniversary.
Right.
So that's been written. They started in 75. We're in 2025 now. At some point during this year, they'll release the book. It tells the story.
Pretty interesting story, I would imagine, too.
It's a fascinating story because Steve Burns' dad, fought in Europe during World War II, as my father did, and landed at Utah Beach. And when he came home, he shared all of his adventures with Steve. But when Steve expressed an interest in fuel, developing fuel, his father told him, study what the Germans did and what the Americans did for fuel during World War II.
Right.
Because in Europe, each side was blowing up fuel dumps and all that. So these two entities who were fighting wars against each other had to develop fuels with what they had available during a war and make it last not just in the vehicles that are on the ground, but the things that are up in the air.
Yeah, you don't want that to go bad.
No.
Right.
So the development of different fuels for those aviation needs, he took and applied what he learned to race car engines.
Right.
And years later, the book ends with the fact that VP has now come out with an unleaded avgas, which has been, the government's been trying to push for unleaded fuels for years. So the book starts with how VP got started, with the technology that came from World War II. And now we're in this unleaded mode, and re-signed with the NHRA and all the other positive things that are happening.
Fantastic. J.K. Kelly, such a pleasure to have you on the show. We really enjoyed it. We had a great conversation. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Deal. Thank you much.
Yeah, take care.
Good seeing you.
And we'll be back in just a couple minutes.
The Classic Auto Mall has more than 1,000 vehicles for consignment in our huge 8-acre climate-controlled showroom. It's a real indoor mall. If you'd like to know all the advantages of buying and selling a car through consignment, the information is available on our website, or you can talk to a classic car specialist who can answer all your questions. It's easy, safe, convenient, and it doesn't matter where you are. We sell worldwide. See our huge selection of classic and collectible vehicles at classicautomall.com.
And we're back with the Classic Auto Mall show from the Classic Auto Mall studio in Morgantown, Pennsylvania, after having a wonderful guest, J.K. Kelly, who left me some new reading material.
Wow, you got plenty to read.
Books.
He's actually a pretty easy read, too. I read Fueling Around.
I read some excerpts of it. I haven't read the whole book yet, but it looked like a good... You know, it's nice to have things that are... They don't tax your brain so hard. And what I mean by that is that there gets so many characters and nuances, and then you try to remember all those as you're reading. My dad used to make notes in the back of a book, like General Smith was the one who bombed the whatever, did that. You know, you like something that's a little bit easier of a read. And especially that's what I think the success of fiction riding is, because it can be anything you want.
Right.
There's no limitation to it, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, great guest and great to have him on. Thanks for him coming into the studio. We like to see people come in and see our digs.
Great.
Here.
Absolutely. Got here early. I said, walk around. He's been here before.
Yeah. It's not many people that we see that live around here that haven't been here, right?
That's true.
So some of the new arrivals this week, how about the 2009 Chevrolet Corvette Z06 Coupe? Cyber gray metallic over ebony, one owner car, pampered, 5,148 actual miles. Service records and paperwork, 505 horsepower, 7-liter LS7 V8. Oh man, that's quite the engine.
That's the right color.
It's everything.
It's perfect.
It's got the 6-speed manual Tremec, showroom new. How about the other new arrival, the 2002 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS Dale Earnhardt Signature Edition?
That's right. Speaking of NASCAR.
Black over ebony, 14,469 actual miles, perfectly preserved, 200 horsepower, 3.8-liter V6, automatic transmission. These are interesting cars. They were really hyper collectible when they first came out. I mean, they were coveted, and people put them away almost as much as they put away the 78 Corvette pace cars. And then they kind of fell off for a little while. They weren't selling as well for whatever reason. And then as of late, there's like a resurgence of Dale Earnhardt and that era of NASCAR thing. So these are really becoming popular again. And of course, this one with low miles, what a great one to own.
Nice.
How about the 1972 Datsun 240Z Coupe? New sight orange.
Yes.
Over black. 76,000 actual miles. That's got the single overhead cam inline 6, which is a great engine.
A whiner.
Oh my God, those things are just. This thing was restored in 2021. Got the 4-speed manual. Got the original window sticker. Oh, hey, how cool is that?
Amazing.
Save that stuff, folks. I don't care if you're buying the most mundane car on the planet, a work truck, Chevy truck.
Yep.
Save everything.
Save the paperwork.
Save the paperwork.
That's right. And this is, I think I wrote in the thing that these, is there a car today that you can name a 2024, 25 model that's going to be as classic as the 240Zs? Because
hard to say.
Who knew? They were everywhere, and now they're classic.
And when they first came out, I remember in 1970 when we first saw them hit the market here, we were like, wow, those are really exotic looking. I mean, compared to a Camaro or a Mustang or a Firebird, they were quite the interesting car. And a 6-cylinder. We at first were a little skeptical of that, but then you realize that they had great performance. They handled well.
Yep.
They were just great cars.
They had a line to sit in the Z at the auto show.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was the most popular car. Other new arrival, the 1940 Dodge VC Series half-ton panel truck. I love panel trucks.
It's cool.
Panel trucks are so
And this one allows, it has a blank slate.
Right.
Like you can put any business on, on the side.
Classic Automall.
Classic Automall, yeah. Why
Or, arbor green and black over black, nicely restored. It's got the L-head inline 6, 3-speed manual. Great opportunity for your business.
It is.
It's a great thing you put out in front of your business or to drive around town. People think, well, you can't drive a 1940s truck around the town every day. Sure you can.
Yeah,
people did it
absolutely
for years and years and years.
Exactly. This one's
Suck it up, Buttercup.
This one's well sorted, as they say. It's
very well sorted.
It's really nice.
Yeah, a driver and a shower. Oh, a shower. Also, new arrival, the 1968 Chevrolet Corvette Coupe, dark garnet red over black, 77,000 actual miles. Numbers matching 390 horsepower, 427 cubic inch V8, and a numbers matching Muncie M20 manual. Side pipes and T-tops, which I think are important on a early 70s or late 60s, early 70s Corvette. I think that side pipes just go with it. They're just add to what that car would have looked like back in the day. And of course the T-tops, they leaked, but who cares?
Who cares?
Yeah, we don't care. My Trans Am
take them off.
doors
Take them off. They won't leak.
They will not leak. They will guarantee to flood you with blood.
And the car dries out faster.
Absolutely.
It's faster. Yeah.
Last but not least, the 1984 Porsche 928S Coupe. Black over tan, long-term ownership, all the service records, 4.7-liter V8, 5-speed manual. You love them or hate them.
Let me tell you, I at the Philly Auto Show, I had a conversation with the sales manager at Porsche Warrington,
right?
Who I have connection with, and
sure.
He was like, yeah, people are looking for 928s.
They are.
He goes, do you have any 928s? I go, as a matter of fact,
we do.
Yeah.
Cha-ching.
So check me out.
Yeah, 928s were unloved for a while, and a lot of the purists of 911 purists thought that the 928 was going to replace the 911, so they were noticeably upset about that. But the 928 ended up being just kind of a stand beside the 911, a different kind of market, more grand touring than raw sports car. Of course, look at what the 911's become. It's more grand touring now. I mean, don't get me wrong, they make GT3B 77Ds that are unbelievable now, that are faster than anything ever. But the regular 911, just the Carrera 911, has become more luxurious than it was back in the day, which is, I guess, okay. So,
well, if you're a kid growing up in the 70s, like you and I, 928s came out in what, 79?
Pretty cool, 77, 78.
They were like, that was the most exotic, cool thing.
Oh, with the black and white checkerboard seat and the honeycomb light
just
type
those rear
wheels.
tail lights.
The tail lights.
Epic.
And it just looked cool. And then the pop-up headlights.
Yeah.
Just
cool.
So we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the 917 Porsche that we've been leading up to. Follow-up. Yeah. So they had it Saturday at Mecum. It no-sailed at $25 million. And there seemed to be a flurry of activity going on. I mean, $25 million bid for a car. There's going to be a lot of activity. Flurry, but apparently there was some running around, and I don't know what happened. Something must have happened that they didn't sell. Either it didn't meet the reserve or something along that nature.
You know who would know that?
Jerry Seinfeld.
Jay Gelati.
Jay Gelati would know that.
Get Jay back on the show.
Yeah, we'll have to get Jay back on the show.
Yeah, he said he'd do a follow-up.
Yeah, let's get him back on the show. Noticeably absent from the sale column was also the two Penske Donahue Camaros. Both no-sailed in the $900,000 range. Wow. But they sold a lot of cars for over $1 million.
Yeah,
they sold stuff that was hard to believe that it brought over $1 million. Stuff that you wouldn't necessarily, a GT350 Shelby Mustang brought like $1 million, 15. I mean, stuff that you just wouldn't exactly expect to bring that kind of money, and it did. And yes, they have a lot of no sales, but they also have 4,000 cars down there.
That's right.
I mean, there's only so many buyers for a 69 Z28, and you got 100 of them.
Plus, I think the 917 probably brought in some big money too, and so there were people there just, hey, I'll take $1 million.
Yeah. I think that the PR and the marketing value for the 917 probably more than paid for itself. Whatever their cost they had associated with it, certainly paid for itself, and certainly will be something that be interesting to know if we find out more about the details of it as time goes on. And we shall see. But we'll get Jay Gelati on.
Absolutely.
To get his take on it. And maybe he'll have some insight, or maybe he won't. I don't, maybe he knows as much as the rest of us do.
We'll see.
And we got a whole other week of watching car auctions on TV, because now we got Scottsdale. We got Barret-Jackson, and we got RM, and we got Gooding, and we got all these. All the big auctions.
It's wintertime.
It's wintertime, and all the wealthy money is out in Scottsdale. So you all have a great time while we're looking at 6 below zero and snow on the ground. And we'll catch you next week on the Classic Auto Mall Show with our special guest, Jay Ward.
Nice.
From Pixar, of the Cars franchise. So he's got some great stories about cars, and then the cars part, and then also about cars. So
and more cars.
And there's some cars too. So we'll talk about that. So we'll catch you next time. Show number 177 is in the can, folks. We'll see you next time on the Classic Auto Mall Show.
You've been listening to the Classic Auto Mall Show with your host, Stewart Howden. Executive producer, Steve Safier. Produced and engineered by yours truly, J.R. Russ. Available on ClassicAutomall.com, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Music courtesy of the Pat Travers Band. For tour dates, contact, and stuff, visit PatTravers.com. Produced by Car Smarts Media. Copyright all rights reserved.